Welcome back to Amplified. The jury has been seated for the federal trial of 3 former Minneapolis police officers charged with violating George Floyd's constitutional rights. Now, 46-year-old Floyd died in May of 2020 after Derek Chauvin pinned his knee to Floyd's neck for 9.5 minutes as Floyd told him he couldn't breathe. Of the 3 officers facing federal charges, one kept onlookers from interceding. Another held Floyd's legs. Another kneed his back. Now, if found guilty of federal civil rights violations, these men could face strong penalties, including life in prison. I want to welcome social justice correspondent Candace Kelley, who will give us more insight on what will be at work with this trial. Candace, good to see you, although I got to say, this feels like a nightmare all over again. We have tried to hear about justice. We have tried to look at this from every angle, and here we are again. Candace, no black people appear to have been seated on this jury. Any red flags
so
for you?
far. Well, 6 white women, 5 white men, 1 Asian is on this particular jury. And then in terms of the alternates, we do have an Asian in that group. So are there any African Americans? No, there are no black people that are going to be at the table deliberating with this jury. And we know that we need that. But the other thing that we have to realize is that we're going to look at this at a case-by-case basis. These particular jurors, they were chosen not just in Hennepin County. That was the situation in the Chauvin trial. These jurors come from all over, a wider breadth of the state, because it is a federal trial. And that's part of the reason why we're ending up with these numbers. But the truth about it is that even if you have one minority, albeit that is an Asian, that does alert people and make them more, alert to what minorities are going through in what we are calling America as it unravels today when we talk about the criminal justice system. But the fact that there are no African Americans at all, and that the one African American that was on there said that he just couldn't be impartial because of his race and because of his faith, that just leads me to think about what it takes to be an impartial juror and a juror that actually gets on the jury. It is a process and a system that you have to work. You do have to know the right things to say and not to say. And unfortunately, this black gentleman, who was the only black man in the jury pool, he said the wrong thing. In fact, he was saying the complete opposite of what it takes to be on a jury. So it's unfortunate that it worked out that way, Laverne.
Yeah, talk about the pressure that they must be under, and that gentleman in particular. He obviously knew the weight of the world would be on his shoulders at that moment. Just once I would like to hear, hey, there's an all-black jury and just one white person. You never hear that, right? But listen, Candace, this time, the jury selection process, it went really quickly. Is that normal? Is that surprising?
Well, this judge has been very interesting so far. Already he's talked about how he wants this trial to happen very, very quickly because of the coronavirus. If we think about the Derek Chauvin trial, they took 2 weeks to select that jury. Here, we took 1 day to select the jury. The difference here is that you didn't have the attorneys questioning those potential jurors. Here you had the judge that was in charge, and he said from the front, this witness list is long, COVID is a concern. I'm going to count on all of you attorneys doing your job well in order to move this along. Let's not make this a bigger thing than what it really is. This has been the sentiment of what he's been expressing. So I wasn't surprised that he got to selecting that jury inside of 1 day. His goal is to get this done a lot quicker than the trial of Derek Chauvin. And I think he has reached that goal already, and that he has not taken 2 weeks. So it's not unusual, because this is a court, the federal court, where the judge is in control, more control than in the state court. And because he was managing everything from the jury selection on, we know that it's going to be a trial that happens a lot more quickly than a 5 or 6 week trial that happened with Derek Chauvin.
Yeah, he certainly was not, being shy about where he stood on things. And, we all have a good understanding of Minneapolis after dealing with the Derek Chauvin trial. But we know that these jurors were not just chosen from Minneapolis, but across the state. What does that say, though? Everybody knows about this case. And are you telling me that they could not find any more minorities? Is this going to have an influence here?
I think it will have an influence. And I think that another thing to understand is that the judge said specifically that this wasn't about race. He said it wasn't about ethnicity, which I thought was a very interesting approach for him to take, because we know that the underpinnings about this, they are about race. No, we didn't hear race in the state trial, but here we're talking about violating George Floyd's civil rights, violating the civil liberties that he had to be a free man walking so that somebody who was a police officer wouldn't bother him. That being said, I think that he was trying to make the point, perhaps, by explaining to the jurors who said, I can't be an impartial juror. He was saying to them, listen, this doesn't have anything to do about race. I think he was in effect trying to help a potential juror get on the jury by saying, let's not get this person out because of the race issue. Let's keep them in because it's not about race. I think that's one approach that maybe he was trying to take to get some diversity within this jury. Because the truth about it is that on an appeal, somebody can always say, well, I think that this was unfair because it didn't have anybody on there that looked like me or that was like me. And you never want to be caught in that situation. I think that one of the things that we have learned from these courts, from these cases and from these court systems from across the country, whether it's the Rittenhouse, whether it's the Arbery trial, is that we really need to look at peremptory challenges and the jury selection process. I mean, you can get rid of so many people for no cause at all. That's a problem. And that's how we end up with situations like this, where we have a jury that is one race or just maybe one African American or an Asian in this case inside of those 12 people. Two actually inside of the 18 people are Asian. Like you're saying, it doesn't make any sense for the county that we're in or even the state that we are in inside of Minnesota.
Listen, you can say it's not about race. You can tell people that all you want. But if you have to say it's not about race, then it's usually about race. Because if it's not about race, why would you even bring it up, right? So, who knows where that's going. But these three former officers, the defendants themselves, they are diverse. One's white, the other's black, one is Hmong American. Could their races ultimately be a mitigating factor in this trial?
I don't think so. I think that what the prosecutors will make sure that the jurors understand is that when it comes to being a police officer, there's just one color, and that's the color of blue. And that is a color that is hard to penetrate. That we have been seeing it within the past couple of years since everybody's been home during the social movement and COVID. Everything has kind of coalesced there. But the truth about it is that the police officers work under one system, and that color is the color of blue. So if they can make that point across, that that's how they work coherently and together, which I think we can obviously see that from the video. Listen, there was one officer, Thomas Lane, that 2 times said, we need to turn George Floyd over. But he didn't get the cosign from anybody else that was around him. And so what did he do? He fell in order to his superior and acted accordingly. So they don't really act as individuals. They act all together as one cohesive unit. I think that is the way and the MO that the prosecutors are going to try to be explaining to the jury during this trial when it gets underway on Monday.
Okay. So the officers themselves, they're actually accused of depriving George Floyd of his constitutional rights. We hear that a lot, though, that term. Explain to us, Candace, what that means in this context, and will the burden of proof in this case be more complex than it would be in a criminal case?
So in this particular context, you have, as you said, this constitutional right. George Floyd had the right to be let alone. He had the right to roam the streets the way that he wanted. He had the right to be protected under the color of law by police officers. That is their duty. So this case has to do with the fact that he did not get any due process, and that as somebody walking freely in the streets, that he should have been left alone. He wasn't afforded to have any process, legally speaking, or with the cops, and that was their role, to protect him. But he had no say. Anything that he said went to unheard ears, to deaf ears. So that's what they're saying by the fact that his civil liberties were violated, and also that these 3 officers had a duty to act and intervene because he needed medical help. They should not have acted like that. So on the one hand, with Derek Chauvin, we are looking at an act that Derek Chauvin actually did and committed, the knee on the neck. When we talk about this federal trial, not only are we looking at the violation of civil rights, but we are looking at the non-act of them because they did not intervene. So I think that that's an interesting parallel here, that we're also looking at these three officers because of what they didn't do. Meanwhile, Derek Chauvin went down because of something that he did do. But to answer your question, it's a very difficult process that the prosecutors will have to prove their case. They have to prove that there was willful intent to deprive him of his constitutional rights and civil rights. And so they're going to have to get into the minds of these three officers in order to prove their case, Laverne. And again, it's difficult. It has to be beyond a reasonable doubt, but we're going to have to understand what was going through their minds during that time. And we can see a lot on the recording by their interaction with everybody around them, exactly what was going through their minds. So once again, that video will play in the favor of the prosecution, regardless of what the defense attorneys say.
Yeah, video, video, video. That's always seems to be the thing that gets everybody. We're almost out of time, Candace, but I need you to real quickly explain something. You mentioned color of law. What does that mean?
So that means that these officers, they were supposed to, when you're an officer, you have a duty to protect, a duty to serve. These officers, they breached their duty. And not only did they breach their duty, but inside of their duty, under the color of law, meaning as police officers, it made it even worse that they didn't do what they were supposed to do. They did not save someone when they saw them in medical stress and medical need. In fact, they literally and figuratively turned their back on him and watched George Floyd die and watch his last breath. And so that's what we mean by the color of law.
All right, got it. Thank you so much. You have been a world of knowledge for us. Thank you, Candace. As always, good to see you here. Candace Kelley, BNC social justice correspondent. Appreciate you joining us here on Amplified. Take care.